Hey, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Time for Agape. Um, we have a good show today. We're going to be talking about something that it's a little more on the sensitive side, and we want to approach it as sensitively as possible. But it's also important, I think, for us to talk honestly about this matter because there's a lot at stake. And we at Agape for First are very passionate about uh, children, protecting children, seeing children grow up into all that God has for them. That's really our heart. And so we do see that there are some things that are happening that I think could potentially harm children and hinder them from stepping into what God has for them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And before I do so, I want to bring on my co-hosts of the show, Luca, Joe, and Darren Mel.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Big D, what up?
Good to see you guys.
You guys have the fancy back screen, and I got myself a green screen, and now no matter what I do, I can't make that appear.
We will figure it out.
New technology.
I think the audience is very forgiving.
Yes, thank you very much.
You don't need the background. Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Well, guys, I'm going to jump right in because there has been just a flood of pro-trans legislation that's been introduced this session in the Minnesota legislature, and so much so that I can't keep up with all of it. I mean, it's really a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But one of our listeners actually sent me an email and highlighted something that was just introduced and something that's happening in our that could really affect our schools. And I said, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, just a word to our listeners. We love to hear from you. And if you have ideas or, topics that you would like for us to do a show on, please let us know. Send us an email and, who knows, maybe that will be the topic du jour.
Du jour.
Du jour, yeah.
Bonjour. Sorry.
But there has been some legislation introduced that would mandate schools, public schools, to be trans affirming and to teach transgender ideology in the state of Minnesota. So Darren, you want to put up that picture that we found on Twitter that kind of highlighted this? So I just want to read this to you. This is how this is being presented to X. It's not Twitter anymore. This is how it's being presented. So the teacher would say to the class, one of the ways that we communicate our gender is by the pronouns we use. That's true. Some people choose not to use any pronouns, and in that case, we use the person's name. Sharing your pronouns is a choice that each person gets to make. Some people may not be ready or feel safe to share their pronouns. Now, this is what we wanted to highlight. Correctly using someone's pronouns shows respect to everyone. Using the pronoun that people ask us to use is important to their well-being. The more times and places that people use the correct pronouns others tell us to use, the happier and healthier that person can be. Now, we wanted to address that. You can, take that down. And so you see in the title of the show, the question is, does that really make us happier and healthier? And I wanted to start by just sharing how the Lord has instructed me on this, because it was a correction from the Lord. And it happened a handful of years ago. I was at a prayer meeting and I was praying for Rachel Levine.
Being-
And Rachel, who now is a transgender man, and I just been appointed to the assistant secretary of health and human services, and I was praying, and man, I thought this was just a great prayer. I was praying for salvation and healing and deliverance, and it was, man, I was just before the throne of God praying for Rachel. And I paused to kind of catch my breath, and the Lord spoke to me. He whispered in my ear, "Nate, who's that?" And I instantly knew that I was being corrected by the Lord. I said, "Lord, I'm sorry. I mean Richard
I
Levine."
remember that day.
Yeah, I know. And I was corrected. And before that, I was maybe a little more wishy-washy on the issue. I don't know, but that moment really solidified, how the Lord has called me to engage with people. And I've always taught that I think that this is why God can be really offensive to people in the LGBT community, because they want to waltz into the throne room and say, "This is who I am," and you need to respect that and call me who I am, and yet it's like, what does the Lord say in the book of Isaiah? Who's the potter and who's the clay? I mean, it's really a potter clay sort of scenario, and the Lord will never entertain or come into agreement with lies that we believe about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so God isn't going to use our preferred pronouns. He's not going to come into agreement with a lie. And in that prayer meeting, as I was crying out to the Lord for the salvation of this man, God said, you need to be like me in this. This is how I approach it. This is how you need to approach it. Now, that's my personal conviction. What do you guys think about all of this?
Luca?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. I think it's, yeah. I mean, I feel for parents that have children that are trapped in this lifestyle, and yes, I mean trapped, because I wouldn't want to have to be the parent that has to, decide what do I call my child. They want to be called the opposite sex, and if I don't, they're not going to feel accepted. But at the same point, if you don't use the pronouns that they were given at birth, then that's going to send them into a tailspin of I mean, how can anything be true? So for me, I think it's a hard thing, but I think using the pronouns that people were born as is more helpful than not. I know for myself, when I was transgender, it didn't do me a lick of good to use the pronouns I preferred, because it just kept me in a state of confusion. And I didn't appreciate those people afterwards either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Darren?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned this before, and the transgender identity is a theft of the person's identity as they were born and given by their parents. And in the transgender, I would say, generally speaking, putting to death their old name and coming as a new person. It's a analogy to baptism in the Christian faith, where you die and you come back and you're risen in Christ. They put away their old self. They kill the person that they were born as, and they're reborn as this new name and new gender of their choice. And that of course is rebelling against who God put our children into our lives as parents. And God tells us to honor our parents. And it's very dishonoring to say, no, the name that you gave me isn't really who I am. This is who I am. When they raised you and God gave them to you, and vice versa. And so it's unfortunate that they cross into that line of spiritually killing themselves and then rebirthing in their own authority of who they are. That I am, a man saying I am a woman, or a woman saying I am a man. And so for us to go along with that, they've put up the wall saying, well, you can't dead name me. If my name was Charles and now I'm Cassie, you can't say Charles, and it means that you don't love me if you use my name. And to a parent, that's heart-wrenching, because your whole life, my kid's name is Sebastian for my son and Esther for my daughter. And God gave us those names, and those names have meaning.
Yeah.
And those kids were given to us to foster into the Christian faith, and help them to grow, and to know the who they are, but then to have them tell, like my kids to tell me, no, that's not who I am. That's heartbreaking.
Oh,
and it's unfortunate that the transgender, like I'd say the LGBT community, as far as the transgender community goes, is that they teach rebellion against the parents, and they love bomb the kids and say, well, we'll be your safe place. And this is what the teachers are doing in the school, and teaching that the teachers are teaching the children that, well, if your parents don't accept you with this different name or this different sex, you can live as that gender here in the school. We'll create a transformation closet where you can change, and we'll call you whatever you want here, and then we'll create a safe place so that you can put your clothes back on and when you go home. And so they're creating an adversarial role with the parents, and then on top of it, teaching them that their parents don't love them if they call them by the name or the pronoun that they were birthed as. And so how I see it is that there is a religious belief system that the school is teaching. And, we use the word ontology a lot, or anthropology, but they're saying, well, no, this boy is authentically a girl, her authentic, quote unquote, her authentic self. And you need to respect that. But as, Luca and I testified that, this graphic that we were talking about was actually in Osseo, where I lived previously. And 2 years ago, Luca and I testified there against the transgender inclusion policy, which set in motion where they're at teaching this stuff. And I was saying, look, we're not a spirit separate of our body, and our body is just an oops, and that we need to fix it. And to teach kids that you might be in the wrong body is leading them to confusion and to harm, because I believe puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and all that stuff is actually harmful. Their body's perfectly healthy. So I'll
well, I mean, there's again, we want to communicate to parents that we feel this, and even Darren, as you were sharing about naming your kids, it was the same for us. Like, we sought the Lord for their names, and those I get choked up just talking about it. Those names are so precious.
We both have an Esther.
We do, and it was an encounter with the Lord where I read the book of Esther, and God his spirit fell on me, and I knew that was her name. And we were it was out of the blue, but so if one of my children were to ever come to me and say, I'm changing my name, even now, I was like, I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. And so I just want to say to all the parents out there that maybe have experienced this, like, we feel that. I know not as much as you, and we're not in the same place, but we want to be sensitive to you and to the hurt that you've experienced. And our desire at Agape First is to restore honor to the family. We have lost the ability to honor each other. And first and foremost in the family, we don't honor our parents. We don't honor each other. We don't we don't have a culture of honor. We know how to dishonor really well. And so we want to see that restored. That's our prayer. And, you know, it takes, I would imagine it would take a lot out of a parent to have to use a preferred pronoun or a different name than the one that they gave, you know? Luca?
Yo, that's me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many places to go. You know, I was reading today on something. It said, why is it considered acceptable to carve up a person's body to match their inner sense of self, but bigoted to help them change their sense of self to match their body? And I think, Nate, you've spoken about this many times. Why are we not just going at the heart of the matter? You know, it's like people want to just throw a Band-Aid over these things.
Yeah.
And then I was reading an article, and this was really a good article that I found today. But it was pretty brave of who did I say it was?
Mayo Clinic.
Mayo Clinic.
Yeah, Mayo Clinic. Thank you. I'm looking right at it. Mayo Clinic put this out today, and this is really bold because there's a lot of pushback on people that are putting this information out there. And what if they put it out there, they get just torn apart for it. But it said they're talking about, now this is talking about puberty blockers, and this study was done from going from male to female and what it did to the testicles. But this study, where is that? I'm going to just read some of the key findings here. It says, but it's talking about, you know, the damage that it does on the testicles of these young children. Let's see here. Researchers analyzed testicular specimens from 87 young individuals ages 0 to 17 undergoing fertility preservation surgery for various health reasons. Among these, 16 were gender dysphoric boys between the ages of 10 and 16, all of whom began identifying as transgender girls between the ages of 2 and 15. 2. Now, somebody tell me I get mad every time I have to say these words.
Yeah.
How the hell does a 2-year-old know what gender even means, let alone dysphoric? Oh,
Yeah.
Mommy, I think I'm gender dysphoric. Somebody's pushing this crap down these kids' throat, and it's nothing shy. I'm sorry, I'm yelling. It is nothing shy of butchering children. They're butchering. This is demonic. It's satanic, and it's abuse. And these people need to have legal charges brought against them for what they're doing. They've took an oath not to harm, and they're killing and destroying wombs and testicles and ripping body parts off like it was your toenail. I'm
Yeah, right. Exactly. And the science backs that up. In fact, so much so that Britain has just outlawed the transitioning of children.
And so is France.
And so has France.
And it's also with the W path, which is the quote unquote experts for transgender care. There's been an expose last month showing that they know that there's harm and they know that there's side effects. They know that it's causing problems, but they've been lying and presenting falsely. And so their quote unquote science is kind of falling apart. And so with the UK and France and other countries figuring this out and banning it, you know, hopefully the US will get caught up. But the day that the WPATH files came out was with the day that the APA endorsed all the treatments for minors. So it's unfortunate, but we're on the right side of history in stopping this.
We seem to be going in a different direction, which is really alarming and confusing. I'm not sure why, because the science doesn't really support these claims. Well, let's get back to the original question. So does pronoun hospitality really make trans people happier and healthier.
For a while. It helped me for a while
Mm-hmm.
until I kept running into myself and saying, okay, all of these people accept me and call me by he and him and Trevor and Travis. I still didn't feel okay inside. Something was still off, but it
Even
didn't
though they
stop.
were calling you a guy?
Yep. I changed my name legally. I was working in the world as a man, as an inspector. People thought I was a dude. That called me yes sir and blah 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 blah. And my driver's license said male, but I never felt okay inside because
Mm.
something was still wrong inside, and the inside needed to be fixed. And no matter what anybody said on the outside of me, it didn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So you really got the full meal deal. You had the pronouns, the name, and the driver's license to prove it. And
Completely socially passing and accepted
and
as a man.
yeah, but it didn't solve your problem.
No, it made it worse.
Interesting. That's not how it works. Yeah.
Right.
Nate, if I could share
Yeah.
statistics from 20 years ago, or 20 years ago, 10 years ago, the APA, American Psychological Association, concurs that there's not any case in which an individual with transgender identity are born that way or can't change. And then according to their handbook, 75% or more of gender dysphoric boys and girls accept their chromosomal sex, which is their birth sex, by adolescence or adulthood.
Yeah.
And then to go into that statistic a little bit deeper, it actually says as many as 98% of boys and 88% of girls, and no less than 75% of boys and girls come to identify with their innate body sex if supported through natural puberty and not socially transitioned. And so this was 10 years ago. And recently a study just came out, I think like in the last week, from Sweden, saying that the transitioning care isn't working and that they're not happy, and that it's harmful. And so, and I'm sorry, I didn't get that queued up. I just remembered
this before.
Yep.
We've only been screaming it for how many years? And Finland too. There was that article by New York. We should put these in I'm going to share these links on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But there was that New York Post article too about the study they did in Finland and finding that people,
Oh yeah.
It didn't help them at all. Transitioning, the pronouns, the hormones, their depression actually went up.
And part of the statistic that they're looking at, that's the low quality data, is immediately after transition. So now you've got this new body, or and so there's the euphoria of being this other thing that you're not.
Yeah.
And so they feel like they're happier and what have you. But those reports that Luca's talking about, they talk about in the long run, over give it 10 years, those issues that were masked by the initial euphoria come back and have to be addressed. And so,
one of the things that the Lord asks of his children is agreement. He wants us to come into agreement with who he is and who we are. And as long as there's disagreement, he's striving against us in those areas, trying to bring us into agreement. There's a conflict. And, I think that applies to this issue as well. We want to help people come into agreement with what's true, because ultimately the truth is what sets us free. Isn't that what Jesus said? Know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
amen.
And so if you want to be happier and healthier, then you need to be agreeing with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not think it's helpful for us to come into agreement with someone's fantasy solution to their pain. I think it does them a disservice, because I do believe that the pain is real. I do believe that There may be trauma. There may be dysphoria. The dysphoria is real, and it is awful. It's horrible. It's painful. But just like with the anorexic, who's skin and bones and on the verge of death, we wouldn't say, oh, but maybe just 5 more pounds, and we would never do that. We wouldn't come into agreement with their dysphoria. It's the same thing. It's dysphoria, but we would want to help them into what's true. You are deathly underweight and you are going to die in a matter of days if you don't start putting weight on and giving your body the nourishment it deserves or that it needs. The same is true for the transgender person. We do not want to come into agreement with something that is ultimately going to lead them down the wide road to hell. I want to be really clear about that. Why would we agree with that? Now, I get it. We're doing a teaching here. This is us telling, the audience kind of the biblical foundation and where we stand. And I want to be sensitive to parents who are really wrestling with this.
Yeah.
We love you. We are for you. And we will sit and weep with you and wrestle through this with you. Our heart is really towards you in this. We're just kind of telling you how God has challenged us and taught us in this. And maybe that will give you some insight and guidance in how to navigate it in your own life. But you get to do that with you and Jesus, right? So I had the Lord personally corrected me. And I love that. I love when God does that. He redirected me and really shored up that foundation. And so we want to really honor parents with the ability to do that and say, hey, you know what? Seek the Lord on this. This is what we've discovered in our journey and in our seeking of the Lord. But you get to do that for yourself and see how that fleshes out with your son or your daughter. But this is a salvation issue. And so that comes into play here. And I know every parent wants to be with their child forever. I know that's my heart. And what parent doesn't want that? And so this is a really difficult thing to wrestle through. But we wanted to let parents know what legislation is actually coming down the pike. And Darren, you want to pull up the the actual bill? Is House File 4394. Yeah.
Yep. So this is the bill that's coming. It's been introduced, and it is that all the schools have to create a gender inclusion policy. And it's pretty long. So it goes into requiring pronouns, requiring locker room access for the gender identity. It's pretty much everything that the transgender caucus brought forward by Representative Lee Finke. It's everything that it's all going to go through.
What's this real?
And so the Senate file is SF 4705, and that's Aaron Mayquade, my former representative. And so, here's just some more of the text. It's pretty long, and every public school will be required to implement this belief system. And gone is the dignity of our bodies. Nate, you teach about androgyny is the plan of the enemy to destroy the image of God on the earth.
Yeah.
And when someone transgenders themselves, they're giving up the image of God and taking on the image of man, that they are their own I am. Mm-hmm. And in the schools, I've tried to testify that we have dignity in our bodies. God, well, I didn't talk about this, the religious side of it, but that our God desires to dwell in our bodies with the Holy Spirit. We're literally his temple. And the transgender ideology desecrates the temple and tries to tear down the temple of God. And when when we have we want to look at our bodies with dignity, that females have parts that men don't, and men have parts that women don't. And these parts that we cover is because they're holy and they have value, and the dignity of not changing in front of somebody of the other sex is a virtue. But now we have this other religion that says our bodies don't matter. It's just your spirit that matters, to the point that you can make your body be whatever you want, and that's body autonomy. And you shouldn't value your privacy. So anybody who's a believer and holds a higher standard of our body and sees it as dignified, they're shamed and said, you are harming the transgender child by not letting them undress in front of the people that they are. Because to the transgender, you're a female can have a penis. It's a female penis is what they teach. And that's what they will be teaching. That's what they'll be. Yeah. You think the pronoun stuff is bad. Wait till you get to female penises, and I'm sorry to talk about this stuff, but they're going to be teaching our kids this. So you
watch Kindergarten Cop, for God's sakes. Instead of writing, boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. His kid was right.
Yeah.
Well, this is an ancient Gnostic belief system called Manichaeism, where he taught spirit good, body bad. There was a separation. There was a distinction between body and spirit or soul. And it didn't matter what you did in the body, because it was really just all about your spirit. It's Gnostic. It's not new. It's just taking on this form in our culture, but it is antithetical. It's not Christian. Jesus sanctified the body in the incarnation. Jesus took on a body, and he will be in a male body forever.
That's right. Penis.
With a yes.
Sorry, I probably didn't want to think about that.
but it's true. He will be in a male body forever. And Luca, you will be in a female body forever. We will not be androgynous in heaven. And so these things matter, because it is about the image of God.
When I first read that, sorry.
Go ahead. No, Luca, you
broke up. When I first heard the word non-binary, I'm like, this sounds like rubbish to me, right? But I mean, people are really struggling. They really are hurting. I understand that, and it's sad. But when I read that terminology, when I really went into the meaning of the word non and binary, you're not bound to anything. And I think how sad that is, because here is the Lord who wants to bind himself to us. And we're claiming, and the people in that lifestyle are claiming not to be bound to anything. That, I don't know, to me that was heartbreaking, because, well, what I just said. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we could go on, and as we tend to do, and maybe this will morph into more of a series. I certainly think we have more to say, but I think we gave enough for today, and just some things to think about, and to pray about, how to inform your thinking. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and thank you for sharing these episodes with friends and reposting them, and thank you for your comments and your emails. We really do appreciate that. You can check us out if you are just stumbling upon this. We have our website, agapefirstministries.org, and you can donate to the ministry /give. We're all US-based missionaries, and this is how we support our families. So if you think that this is a good thing that we're doing, we would love to have your prayers and your financial support. We have a Facebook page that you can visit, facebook.com/Agape First Ministries. There's our YouTube channel at Agape First Media. So lots of ways that you can engage with us and connect with us as a ministry. Well, that brings
That's
us
a deep
to
subject.
yeah, I know, right?
Why I'm 60 and I still say that joke. It's dumb. Everybody in the world has heard it, but I still say
I
it.
love it. I love it. That brings us to the end of our show. And again, thank you all for watching.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Turn your volume down. Here comes the outro. Okay, bye-bye.